The first thing Thomas Hale learned about Montana highways was that they were quiet in a way that felt alive, like the land breathed when no engines were running. The second thing he learned was that silence could be deceiving. He'd been with the Montana Highway Patrol for only 7 months, a skinny 26-year-old with a sharp jaw, clean uniform, and the kind of haunted determination that made older troopers joke he was trying too hard. He'd wanted the badge since he was 12, when a sheriff's deputy pulled his sister out of an overturned pickup during a snow squall. Back then, the badge meant safety meant honor. 7 months in, Thomas still believed that mostly, but the night before his first autumn snowstorm patrol, he overheard something in a locker room that didn't match any of the academy speeches about duty. Voices hushed, irritated. Just keep the reports sealed. We don't want the feds sniffing around. Families won't push it. They know better. New girl was from up north. Don't make it our problem. Thomas froze behind a row of lockers. He recognized the voices. Sergeant Rickson, his immediate superior, and Deputy Marcus Collier from the county sheriff's office. Already taken care of, Collier said. Same as the others. Others? Thomas didn't breathe. Then boots scraped, a door shut, and silence returned. He told himself he'd misheard. That was some administrative issue, something bureaucratic and dull. But the next morning, when he checked incident logs, he noticed what he wasn't supposed to notice. 3 missing persons reports, native women in their early 20s, had been filed, then quietly removed from the public system. All 3 marked transferred to state review with no follow-up. He asked Rickson about it during shift briefing. Rickson's smile was too slow. Paperwork backlog, he said. Don't worry about it. But his eyes said, drop it. And for the first time since the academy, Thomas's faith in the badge felt slightly cracked. 2 weeks later, he found the abandoned truck. It was parked at a turnout off Highway 93 north of Missoula, coated with dust and the kind of neglect that meant someone had walked away without planning to return. A purse sat on the passenger seat. Keys in the ignition. Door open. The registered owner, Ava Running Horse, age 23. One of the names he'd seen on the transferred list. He called it in, expecting urgency. Rickson arrived in 12 minutes, tires hissing on gravel. He barely glanced at the truck. Good find, he said, though he didn't sound pleased. I'll take it from here. But Thomas began. Didn't I tell you? These cases are sensitive. Jurisdiction's muddy. Let me handle it. He shut the truck door, took out a pair of latex gloves, and began wiping the handle. Wiping it. Thomas felt his stomach twist. That's evidence, he said. Rickson looked at him for a long, still moment. Then he smiled that slow smile again. Protocol changes depending on context. Hale. You knew. You'll learn. That night, Thomas lay awake, replaying the scene. The wiping. The removed reports. The voices in the locker room. He needed proof. Something incontrovertible. Something dangerous. He began quietly, talking to tribal police on the Blackfeet and Salish reservations under the guise of checking for cross-jurisdictional updates. Most were polite, but tired, like they'd had this conversation before with officers who never listened. Finally, an older Blackfeet officer named Carter Many Bears looked him in the eye and said, You're asking about the missing women, aren't you? Thomas nodded. Carter sighed. Thought so. You got that look. What look? The look of someone who still believes systems fix themselves. He folded his arms. Listen to me carefully, Officer Hale. Women have been disappearing for years. Some walk away. Some don't. Some aren't given the chance to walk anywhere. Are you saying law enforcement is involved? Carter didn't blink. I'm saying some men think the badge is a shield for whatever they want to do. And some counties don't bother looking too hard when native girls vanish. That's not how it's supposed to be. Carter's jaw tightened. Tell that to their mothers. Thomas left with a new weight on his shoulders. He wasn't wrong then. Something was happening. Something ugly. He wasn't sure yet what he'd do about it. But he knew one thing. He couldn't ignore it anymore. 2 days later, a call went out over dispatch. Unit needed for welfare check, County Road 12, Old Grain Mill. Rickson's unit responded first, but Thomas was only 6 miles out and arrived second. The mill was abandoned, boards warped, roof sagging, the whole place smelling of wet dust. Rickson stood outside his cruiser, expression unreadable. "What's the check?" Thomas asked. "Anonymous tip," Rickson said. "False alarm. Nothing inside." Something in his tone made Thomas's skin crawl. "Mind if I look?" Thomas asked. Rickson stepped between him and the mill door. "I said it's clear." But then a sound drifted out, a faint metallic clatter, like a chain or a drop tool. Rickson stiffened. Thomas's hand hovered near his flashlight. "Someone's in there." "It's nothing," Rickson snapped. "Get back to your cruiser." Then Thomas heard it, a muffled cry. Reflex overrode caution. He pushed past Rickson. "Hail!" Rickson barked, but Thomas was already inside. The mill's interior was dark, beams of midday sun cutting through cracked boards. Dust rose around him with every step. A shape moved in the back corner, small, shaking. He shined his light. A girl, maybe 19, native, hands zip-tied, eyes wide with terror. She flinched when she saw him. "It's okay," Thomas said softly. "I'm here to help." Footsteps pounded behind him. "Rickson." "Hail," Rickson said sharply. "Step away from her." Thomas drew his weapon without thinking. Rickson froze. "You don't want to do that," Rickson said. "She needs medical attention," Thomas said, voice shaking but steady. "And I'm calling this in." Rickson's eyes hardened. "She's got no ID, no family looking for her. No one will know she's gone. Put the gun down." And just like that, the truth snapped into place. It wasn't bureaucracy. It wasn't paperwork delays. It wasn't jurisdiction confusion. It was them, his own unit, the sheriff's office, and who knew how many others. He kept his gun trained on Rickson. "Call an ambulance." "Now." Rickson studied him. "You're making a mistake." "No," Thomas said. "You are." Rickson stepped back slowly. "Fine," he said, lifting his radio. But instead of calling EMS, he keyed in a code Thomas didn't recognize. And then he said 3 words Thomas would never forget. "We got trouble." Backup didn't come in sirens. It came in silence. Within minutes, 2 cruisers and a county SUV rolled up, engines purring low. Thomas recognized the men who stepped out: Collier, Hammett, and Wills. He'd eaten lunch with them last week. They spread out in a semicircle, weapons holstered but hands ready. Rickson's smirk returned. "Last chance, Hale. Walk away." Thomas steadied his breathing. "Not happening." Collier shook his head. "Damn shame. Thought you'd fit in here." "You hurt women," Thomas spat. "We kept things quiet," Wills corrected. "Big difference." The girl whimpered behind him. Thomas knew he couldn't win this. Not in a firefight. But maybe he didn't need to win. He just needed a head start. He grabbed the girl with one arm, turned, and kicked out a side door he prayed wasn't locked. It swung open. Gunfire cracked behind him. Dust exploded around his boots as he sprinted toward the tree line, dragging the trembling girl with him. "Run," he gasped. "Keep your head down." He didn't know how long they ran, maybe minutes, maybe hours before the forest swallowed them. But he knew one thing. He wasn't a police officer anymore. Not in the way he dreamed. Not in the way that meant safety. He was a target. They didn't stop until dusk. The girl collapsed near a fallen log, breathing hard. Thomas knelt beside her. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Jessa." "I'm Thomas. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." "They already tried," she whispered. He couldn't deny it. "Do you know how many officers?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I heard them talking. There were others. Before me." Thomas stared at the ground. He'd joined the patrol to protect people like her, not to save them from other officers. Jessa looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Are you going to kill me too?" Shock jolted through him. "God, no. I'm getting you out of here." "But they'll come." He nodded. "I know." Then he made the call he'd been dreading. He dialed Carter Many Bears. Carter's truck met them near an old service road at midnight. When he saw Jessa, he closed his eyes briefly, murmuring something under his breath, part prayer, part curse. "You did the right thing calling me," Carter said. but you realize your career is over. Thomas nodded. He'd realized that in the mill. What now? He asked. Now, Carter said, we gather proof. Real proof. Enough that even the state can't cover it. Jessa shivered in the truck's back seat. Carter handed her a blanket. You're safe now. She didn't seem convinced. Thomas wasn't sure he was either. Carter drove them to the tribal headquarters on the reservation, one of the few places county deputies never entered without cause. Inside, Jessa gave a statement. It was halting, traumatized, fragmented, but it was damning. Carter leaned back in his chair. This is bigger than a couple of bad apples. Thomas nodded. Rickson said same as the others. How many others? Too many, Carter said, and too many ignored. Until now. They looked at each other across the table. Then Carter said what Thomas didn't want to admit. They're going to try to silence you. I figured, Thomas said quietly. You ready for that? Thomas swallowed. I didn't join the patrol to be on the wrong side of this. Carter nodded slowly. Good, because we're not stopping. For the next 3 days, Thomas and Carter worked in secret, pulling buried case files, recovered dashcam stills, and handwritten notes from reservation families who'd been dismissed by county officers. Patterns emerged, dates, locations, responding units. All roads led back to Rickson Circle. It was methodical, coordinated, hidden in plain sight. Jessa identified 2 of the men who transported her, Collier and Wills. Carter contacted a federal liaison he trusted, discreetly. They agreed to meet at an isolated ranger station on the 4th night. Finally, there would be justice. Finally, someone would listen. But the 4th night never came, because the hunters found Carter's truck before sunrise. Empty, doors open, tire tracks circling like wolves. Thomas felt the panic rise in his chest. They found us. Jessa clutched his sleeve. What do we do? He forced himself to breathe. They're coming, she whispered. Yes, Thomas said, but we're not running anymore. They retreated to the ranger station anyway, because it was remote, fortified, and had a radio line that didn't route through county dispatch. Thomas barricaded the doors, set his service pistol on the table, and checked the windows again. Will the feds show? Jessa asked. They'd better. He wasn't sure they would. Headlights appeared on the ridge at 11 p.m. 3 vehicles, maybe 4. Jessa backed away from the windows. That's them. I know it. Thomas clicked the safety off his pistol. They won't stop, she whispered. Not until... I know. The vehicles parked in a fan formation. Doors opened. Dark figures fanned out. A spotlight flashed on. Rickson's voice boomed from a loudspeaker. Hale, let's talk. Thomas stepped outside, gun concealed at his side. Rickson smiled like they were sharing an inside joke. This isn't you, he said. You're a good cop. You followed orders. Those weren't orders, Thomas snapped. They were crimes. Rickson laughed. You think anyone will believe you? Over us. Thomas's jaw tightened. Jessa gave a statement. Oh, Rickson said, we're well aware of your little refugee. Thomas's blood went cold. Rickson shrugged casually. Hand her over and you walk away. No record. No charges. New station assignment. Thomas stared at him, stunned. You think I think, Rickson interrupted. You don't understand how the world works yet. We're trying to teach you. Thomas lifted his pistol. Rickson's smile evaporated. Last warning, Thomas said. Leave. Now. Behind him, a second spotlight activated. A 5th vehicle. Then a voice shouted. Federal agents. Drop your weapons. Rickson's men froze. Chaos erupted. Shouts, scrambling hands, dropped rifles. A dozen federal agents poured out of the tree line, guns raised, lights glaring. One of them, Agent Patel, Carter's old contact, ran at Thomas. You okay? Patel asked. Thomas nodded, stunned. How did you? Carter called us before they got to him, Patel said grimly. We traced his last ping to your ranger station. We were already moving. Relief hit Thomas like a punch. Behind them, agents wrestled Rickson and the others to the ground. Jessa stepped out of the building slowly, trembling. Patel approached her gently. "You're safe now." She didn't speak, but she nodded. The scandal broke across Montana like a wildfire. News stations aired segments hourly. Families came forward. Old cases were reopened. Rickson, Collier, Wills, and Hammett were indicted on federal charges, including kidnapping, conspiracy, and obstruction. More officers across 2 counties were suspended. The governor issued a statement. The highway patrol distanced itself. And Thomas? Thomas was asked to resign for his safety, but he refused. Instead, he joined a federal state task force dedicated to investigating crimes against Native women, still wearing a badge, but finally on the right side of it. Jessa entered a recovery program on the reservation. Carter visited her often. Thomas visited too. She used to flinch when he entered the room. By winter, she didn't anymore. One cold January morning, Thomas stood at the edge of Highway 93, the same road where Ava Running Horse's abandoned truck had been found. Snow drifted across the pavement. The mountains were quiet again, but not deceptively so. This time, the quiet meant something else. He looked at the highway stretching ahead, broken, winding, unfinished. A long road, but one worth walking. He put on his hat, adjusted his badge, and stepped back toward his cruiser. The radio crackled. "Unit 3, we've got a report of a missing girl out of Browning. Mother's waiting at the station." Thomas keyed the mic. "On my way." He drove into the rising sun. The road wasn't safe, but he was out there now, and he wasn't running. Not anymore.